if you are someone who's good at it and confident in it, you will become 10 times more valuable to an employer or to an organization, I think. Yeah. Especially people who are willing to do it, because most people shy away from it because it can be just soul destroying. Your early career decisions do not pigeonhole you, and you can be an expert on one thing and you don't have to exclusively work on that thing, because no one's out here saying, oh, but now you're studying sharks and therefore you're not an expert on baboons. Like, you can do two things at the same time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But I'm like, what do you expect from a conservationist? Like, why would you assume a conservationist would be apolitical? Because politics is embedded into the industry. Everything we do is political. She was an established research scientist, and we were just chatting one day and I was like, oh, your career is so interesting, like, tell me everything. And she was kind of like, if I could do it again, I would work in policy. And I was like, such a cool career. And she just said, I just think you can make more difference in policy. And then we talked about it and she explained it, and she basically said, because when you asked about what challenges wildlife is facing, so on that trip I learned about rhino poaching, and this reserve in particular are very vocal about the rhino poaching crisis and are very much on the front line of it. And it just really devastated me.
Welcome to Working with Wildlife, where I, your host, Jaden Lunt, speak to experts and enthusiasts in different fields of nature to find out how and why they do what they do. In today's episode, I am talking to a wildlife biologist who has experience in both the terrestrial world working with wildlife in Africa and the marine world working with corals in the Maldives. With a master's in conservation biology and almost 200,000 followers across social media, she is helping others find their own way into the world of wildlife management and conservation. Please welcome to the show the kind-hearted and passionate Kate Sheridan. Thank you very much for coming on today's show. I'm super excited to get into the conversation, hear a little bit about your story and how you are being able to work with wildlife in so many different and awesome locations. First off, how's your day going? And can you give a little bit of an introduction to what you do?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm going to look like a pop star if you're watching this on video, because I can't find my microphone stand. But I promise you I'm not. I'm very tone deaf. Yeah, my day's going well. Thank you. It's nice and early here in the UK, so it's a much more like sociable time for me. Yeah, my introduction to me. So I am a wildlife biologist. I've been working and studying in wildlife conservation for about 10 years now. I have a background from university. I studied a geography undergrad degree, and then I did a master's in conservation biology. And since then, graduating, I've been kind of working in different fields, done quite a myriad of ecosystems. I'm definitely someone who has quite a broad spectrum of interests within the wildlife field. So I've done both marine biology and worked on land. So my real like home, I think, is the African savannas. That's like the ecosystem I gravitate towards. But I have also worked with coral reefs, which I absolutely loved. I'm a big water baby as well. So those two things maybe contradict
one another. You fit both on the land and in the water. You're comfortable both. Awesome.
I always say I did my master's to try and like hone down my interests and figure out my niche, and it did the complete opposite because I just liked everything.
Done the opposite.
Yeah, wow. Like, great, it's not helpful. So yeah, worked with a few different ecosystems, but I think that's quite cool and quite nice. And the good thing is I think is a bit of a myth that you have to niche down in terms of ecosystem. I think it's better to niche down in terms of skills. And there's a lot of transferable skills.
It's a myth, you say. Because I mean, I've heard niching down in like the business sense, but you're saying there's also like a bit of a thing around niching down ecosystem wise.
I think so. I think especially marine versus not marine, because I think once you label yourself as a marine biologist, people are like, "Well, you're a marine biologist, then like stay in the water." But I don't think that needs to be like that. Obviously, it's hard to transfer knowledge from ecosystem to ecosystem. So from my work with coral, I have a lot of very niche specific knowledge of corals, particularly one group of coral that I worked with a lot. I know a lot about them, and that is not helpful to then go and work in the African savanna. But through my
Not
work
quite.
with corals,
Yep. Right.
yeah, through my work with corals, I did a lot of study design, data analysis, research-based skills that I developed there are very transferable to any ecosystem. So I think you can definitely build up skills that are transferable, even if the kind of specific knowledge isn't. And I think people do like to. I would caveat, it kind of depends. Obviously, there's a benefit to becoming an expert in one specific thing. And some people study one thing for their whole lives and they are an expert in that field. But even the academics that I've worked with in the past were experts on one thing, but they didn't just exclusively work on that thing. My master's supervisor is an expert on baboons, particularly related to human-wildlife conflict. But he's just generally an expert in human-wildlife conflict. He just has a real expertise with baboons. But him and I worked together on sharks. And that...
Well, I can see that there's not much similarity between a baboon and a shark. Yeah.
No. Okay. And he did his PhD... I don't know if he'll ever listen to this. Hi, Justin, if you're listening to this. But he did his PhD on mole rats. And so he's like my favourite example of
mole rats,
how... Yeah. Your early career decisions do not pigeonhole you, and you can be an expert on one thing and you don't have to exclusively work on that thing, because no one's out here saying, oh, but now you're studying sharks and therefore you're not an expert on baboons. Like, you can do two things at the same time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a myth that you have to pick something in your early 20s and then stay with it forever, and that you can't mix it up a bit, and that me spending 3 years working with coral has made me somehow less qualified to work with a different ecosystem. I just don't understand how 3 years of like practical research experience can make you less qualified.
Yeah, and for yourself, like, you get a lot of questions from people asking, like, how can I work with wildlife? That's kind of been something that your online presence has become, is answering it and kind of giving some guidance to people trying to figure out like their career in wildlife. Do you think that is it a challenge to change from a water ecosystem to a land ecosystem? Is it a difficult change? And why do people think that they have to stay in one career? This myth that you're talking about.
That is a good question. I should also probably add to my introduction that you've just picked up on that I'm also a content creator. I always forget that bit somehow. But
that too, yes.
Yeah, kind of feeds into being a wildlife biologist. I make content about conservation and working with wildlife. So very fitting for this podcast. And yes, I do get a lot of questions from people who want to work with wildlife about how to do it. And there is no one size fits all. But to come back to your question, I think I didn't find it that difficult to switch. I think, interestingly for me, when I went to work with coral, it was during COVID, and the pandemic put a halt on everything. So I was doing the most random things for about a year and a half during the first year and a half of COVID. So from March 2020 until about September 2021, I was in lockdown with everyone else, and I did a few conservation jobs. I was lucky in a way. I managed to stay connected to the field somehow, but it was very short-term projects and remote working, a lot of unpaid stuff, and a lot of freelance work. And then I had a job in a shop as well. So a shop that went completely online, and a bar actually that went completely online, was doing online orders. So I just had a hospitality-based COVID-y job. So I wasn't just working in conservation.
Hospitality, but online. All right.
Yeah. You know, when going COVID where, I don't know what it was like in Australia, but I imagine similar to the UK where only shops allowed to stay open were essential services, but off licenses and like liquor stores were deemed an essential service. So I worked for a company that had a bar, which obviously had to close. So the bar kind of became a warehouse for the corresponding shop. And so basically my job was to pack up boxes of wine for people to order, because that was absolutely essential, apparently, during a pandemic.
Yes. Yes, completely. Yes.
Yes, definitely. So I had a few projects in conservation going on.
Different
but
things going on.
Yeah, nothing that was really paying the bills, and it was a pandemic. So what are you going to do? But the Maldives opened up because of the nature of the country. It's small islands. They had their COVID under control pretty quickly with one tough first lockdown, because the islands are very small. Limiting movement was very easy. So they opened up a little bit earlier than a lot of other places, and they were hiring because a lot of the foreigners who were working there before left during COVID. So they opened earlier in 2021, and they were hiring. And so it was one of the only places to get a wildlife job at the time.
Yeah, at the time. So you found that, yeah.
So that's why I ended up doing it. And I also did really want to do it. Like, I wanted to go to the tropics at some point in my career, and that was a great time to do it. But
totally,
I was not a marine biologist, I wouldn't say. But I've always loved water. I was scuba qualified. Had done a lot of scuba diving for fun, and my master's thesis that I kind of alluded to earlier was about sharks. So I did have a little bit of marine experience, but the majority of my working experience, and apart from my master's thesis, was all terrestrial based stuff. Like, as I said, mostly I love working at African Savannah, and then work experience that I'd had from the UK was all terrestrial stuff. So in my own head, I didn't consider myself a marine biologist, and then I did this coral work, and now everyone thinks I'm a marine biologist.
Yes. You got some great photos. It looked like you had a great time.
Oh, it was amazing. Yeah, it's a beautiful place. But I had sorry, this is a very long answer to quite a simple question, but I did have an interview while I was in the Maldives when I was looking for next steps, and this was for a research position that was going to be land-based, and they said to me at the end of the interview, having spoken to me, we're really glad we spoke to you, because from your application we thought you were a marine biologist. And I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm not. And I was like, well, I am. So I said, I can see why you would think that, and because of the nature of this position, I think they would have looked at very specific sections of my CV. For example, all the published literature that I've written is marine based. My project manager experience is marine based. So I was like, that's probably what they read. And I can see why they then thought that. But I was a bit like, well, A, I have a lot of terrestrial experience, but B, does it matter? And they were like, no, it doesn't really matter. Like, we just didn't realize you had such an interest, like, beyond marine stuff. So I think it depends how you market yourself.
Yeah, well, that's a good point as well, how you market yourself. You said one of the things they said is, it sounded actually there was a question, like, it doesn't matter that you are a marine biologist, not so much terrestrial biologist kind of thing. That was kind of the question that you asked, and they said no, it didn't really matter. So I'm thinking for a lot of people that it does matter to them. But these professionals, this job that you're looking for or looking at joining, and did you end up getting this job?
I didn't, but I did get to the final two, so I got quite far.
Okay, awesome. So that they didn't close you off. Do you believe that most, like, it's a bit of an idea that it's hard to get into a different biological field experience? What with say you've got a lot of oceanic experience, moving then to terrestrial. Is there a kind of a mental block that people face from the kind of some of the questions that you've received through your social media?
I think so. I will say that it is probably easier if you have specific experience to then get a position in that thing. So, for example, if you've done an internship with coral reefs, it will be easier for you to get a full-time position with coral reefs than someone who did an internship with giraffes. So I would say if you do know what you really want to do, it is good to get experience in that specific thing. However, I think that I don't think it's disqualifying if you don't have that specific experience. It might be slightly harder, but I think when I say harder, what I mean is it's just going to be you've just got to do a little bit more convincing when you're applying for those positions. My big thing
so being able to communicate is important in that.
Yeah, definitely. I think, and I believe, as someone who has worked in this industry, has been on both the like application and the hiring side, like I've employed people and I've been employed, is
Right.
that I think knowledge can be taught, whereas skills have to be developed. So like anyone can learn a bunch of facts. And if you have a background in biology, zoology, ecology, whatever, if you have already, you're predisposed to this subject, you're going to know how to learn about something. So if suddenly I'm tomorrow going to be doing a research project about giraffes, I can just read about giraffes for as long as I need to and get that knowledge and learn it. Like, of course, and because I'm already predisposed to understand what I should be looking for. Obviously, if I then had to do something about corals, I wouldn't need to do that. I already know. But if it was about something else, I can just learn it. Whereas if it's a job where I'm going to need to know how to do data analysis on specific types of data, that's a skill that you can learn, but you need to practice. So I think skills are important and knowledge is easier to learn faster than skills are. So I think if you are looking for an internship, look at, or an early career position, if you find something that fits within the ecosystem that you want to work in, that's amazing and good for you. But don't disclose other opportunities if they offer the chance to develop really key skills that would be transferable to any ecosystem. And I definitely think it's a myth that the decisions you make in your early career pigeonhole you. That even up to the level of doing a PhD on, let's say you do a PhD on elephants, that does not mean that you have to work with elephants for the rest of your life. A PhD is one of the best ways to develop research skills at such a high level.
Yes, right.
Those skills will be transferable. Those skills will be what people look for. So I think yes, it might be easier if you are one of the extremely fortunate people who knows what they want to do early in life, and that never changes. But assuming you are in the majority who change their mind every now and then or have a broad range of interests, I think it's a myth that you pigeonhole yourself really early on. I just don't think
that's a great myth. That's a great myth for some people, I think, because if it is a myth, then that means it's not true. But can I ask? You said you've been on both the hiring and the employee in the employed side. You also said that skills are super important and that knowledge can be learned, of course, but is easier than skills. What are some of the main transferable skills from different career pathways that you think are important to have?
I think for my path of like research scientist is data analysis. I think is a really important skill that people avoid for fair enough reasons. It's very hard to start. Like I hated it at uni. I did not get it. But once it clicks, it becomes a lot easier. So I would advise people going through that time, which is hard. I appreciate it, to stick with it. Stick with it because it will massively pay off. And it is incredible to me how many people working in this field ignore stats and data analysis as a skill and don't. Okay. If you are someone who's good at it and confident in it, you will become 10 times more valuable to an employer or to an organization, I think. Yeah. Especially people who are willing to do it, because most people shy away from it because it can be just soul destroying, but it can also be really
what makes so it could be so soul destroying but also satisfying. What makes it so like challenging? Because like personally, data analysis I've done very I'll say very minimal in the experience level in data analysis. Why is it so challenging?
I think it's because it's taught badly. And that is no disrespect to anyone who taught me. I had a few really good teachers who taught me, which helped a lot, but I also had people that taught it badly. I think this is a recurring problem with anything kind of mathematical. Like this is a bit of a tangent, but when I was in school, I did maths A-level. So in the UK, the end of school, what you do when you're 17 and 18, the last 2 years are called A-levels. and you typically do 3 or 4 subjects. So you really kind of narrow down, only do a couple subjects, and you do these A-levels, and they are quite a lot harder, or I at least found them quite a lot harder than what you did when you were 16, which we call GCSEs. Anyway, I did Maths A-level. Maths A-level was particularly hard. I found it particularly hard anyway. And a lot of my teachers were rubbish because they were really good at maths. And I think this becomes then another problem when you go to university, is you're getting taught by professional academics who have a lot of experience doing statistical analysis, and they know it really, really well, and they don't know how to explain it to people who know nothing. Right. And I had this at school. A lot of my maths teachers were really naturally gifted at maths. So they would explain it to you. If you didn't understand it straight away, they had no plan B, because they were like, well, why didn't you get it?
They just gave up on you. Right.
Yeah, to them it was so obvious. And I had one teacher who was the best teacher to this day that I have ever had. And I credit so much of what I've achieved to this man. He wasn't very good at maths, but he was such a good teacher. Like, he was obviously very good at maths now, but when he was in school, he wasn't good at maths. So he had learned multiple methodologies to solve the same problem, because the first one didn't make sense to him. So he learned the other one. And so it meant he was a really good teacher, because if you didn't understand it, he'd be like, okay, I can see this isn't working for your brain. Does this fit how your brain works better? And he would help you. And then eventually he could learn how you think, and he would be able to explain stuff. So
right.
He was brilliant. And I think that at university, unfortunately, a lot of the times the professors they've forgotten what it's like when you have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And so sometimes they're explaining things that they think are really simple. And so I do think often it's quite badly taught. I also think these types of skills universities typically not the best environment to learn it. Like, I definitely developed these skills in my master's, because my master's was 11 people in a room. It was a very niche and specific course. So we had a small class. So it was more like school. So you could get one-to-one attention. Whereas when I did my undergrad, we'd be like 70 people in a room. So they can't, teaching something like stats is very difficult to teach to that big of an audience. So you don't get much help. So I do think it's partly because it is badly taught, and it's a lot of jargon. There's a lot of words, and people I just remember being sat there being like, you could be speaking Swahili for all I care. Like, I do not understand what you're saying.
Just really like didn't another get it.
Language. Yeah. So I think that's why people get intimidated by it. I think because they've had that terrible experience where they're just sat there being like, I don't understand this. And then they go into, well, I'll never understand this. I just don't get it. And I think that's a shame. So I think that's part of the reason.
A bit defeated.
Yeah. I think there are obviously also people who just get it straight away. Like the naturally mathematically minded people. And then there are those who had good teachers who were able to push through it. But I think I think it is an important skill that is very transferable across all research disciplines.
Awesome.
So I would definitely recommend that. Another skill I think is undervalued but extremely important is communication, both to your peers, but also to a wider audience. So being able to communicate within the field to other people who have that baseline knowledge, and then to people who know zilch, nothing.
Yeah. You said like, it seems like it's an undervalued kind of trait to have, or a skill. An underrated skill is this communication. What evidence have you experienced in your field experience, or across your career so far, that you've seen it being undervalued when it should have been more of a priority, maybe?
Ooh, that is a good question. I think sometimes from the older generation of people, and this is really generalizing, and I know that there are lots of people who are in the older generations who don't fit this mold, but
but this is what you've experienced.
From some people, is that things like social media are not I don't know what the right word is. They sort of look down on it slightly, that it's not intellectual. Right. It's not, it's the sort of, you're
one of those people.
It's kind of looked down on slightly, and it's not everything. And to be honest, I do kind of understand that mindset, because they're looking at it in, this is years of research, years of work. How are you condensing that into a 30-second TikTok? How are you able to communicate the nuance of this scientific research in such a short attention span economy of social media? Which is true. I do understand that. But I think the value of social media should never be underestimated, because you could reach 1 million people quite, I would say easily. It's not
much
easy to go viral, but it's a lot easier than getting them to read your peer-reviewed publications. So I think
definitely.
I think sometimes from the older generation, they'll kind of not really, probably comes from a lack of understanding of social media if they're not social media users. I think also sometimes communication it's perceived as undervalued, even if people aren't actively undervaluing it, they just don't have time. And I think it's something that we need to remember to make time for. Again, I was very lucky with a lot of the academics I worked with when I did my master's, which was in Cape Town.
Cape Town was, I've seen some footage from a guy that I'll be speaking to on the podcast soon, and it's amazing. The underwater world there, like the kelp there is quite spectacular. But also I hear it's got like you correct me if I'm wrong, or fact check me later, but I believe it has the highest like biomass bio count in the city. The city of Cape Town has the highest bio count of wildlife anywhere in the world. So there's more different species of wildlife in Cape Town in a city than any other city in the world, which is quite something.
That sounds true. I don't know 100%, but it sounds
legit.
It sounds very likely, because Cape Town has the Table Mountain National Park within the city, which is a fynbos ecosystem. Well, the mountain itself, the land element of the national park, is the fynbos ecosystem, which is an endemic biome to that area of South Africa. So it's very high. That's fynbos, yeah. Very
so that's the terminology to describe that it's like a unique to that area?
Yeah, fynbos is the name of the biome. So it's like not a well-known biome, because it's literally just in this one place.
Right. Okay.
But it is,
okay. That's how unique it is. Right.
Yeah. So not only is it very like high in biodiversity, it's also very high in endemism. So a lot of endemic species that are only found in that region of South Africa are within the city of Cape Town. And because of where the city is on the coast, you've got the Table Mountain National Park on land, and then you've got the Table Mountain National Park marine protected area, which is around the city. So you've also within the kind of boundaries of the city, you've got the underwater world as well. And again, there's quite a lot of endemic species there. And it's also this kelp ecosystem that's very rich in biodiversity. So studying there was cool, because you're in a biodiversity hotspot. So you could go out and see wildlife all the time. And so it was a very cool place to study conservation. And so much cool conservation is going on in the heart of the city. So it's very, very cool. But a lot of the professors there that I had were very attuned to communication, and they definitely kind of try to drill into us, like, once you've got your peer review, if you get your peer review publications, make sure you're also creating kind of communication, like other forms of communication to a mass audience. So you're also doing podcasts, you're also writing magazine articles or things that are not just for the scientific community. Yeah, they were quite on the pulse, I think, there. But the problem is like, people are busy and they don't always have time to do all of those things. And so they do one or two. So maybe they'll conduct a study, they'll try and get it published in peer review, and then when it comes out, there'll be this kind of flurry of, they'll post on Instagram about it and link the study, but they won't make targeted content for a mass audience on what they're doing. And I think
and continuously, it's more like just a short burst of content, right?
So I think that in that sense, communication can be undervalued, because there's a lot of pressure from researchers and academics to publish in peer-reviewed journals, because that's where a lot of funding comes from. And obviously that's good for their careers. And it is important as well for your study to be taken seriously. But then it's kind of, that's also a very long and slow process, can be. So by the time it comes out, you are like not thinking about what else you can make around that study. So So I think it's not undervalued consciously, but sometimes it just isn't put to the top of the priority list. And then when people are struggling for time and resources, they don't come back to the communication side of things. But I think that is shifting. And so I do think it's a good skill for people to have, to be able to write both scientifically and to be able to write things like blog articles, magazine articles. I think those skills are being more and more valued, particularly by NGOs. At least that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a lot more jobs for like social media management and content creators that are creating content for a wide variety of platforms in the wildlife space.
Okay, you said NGO there. What does NGO mean?
So
forgive me for my ignorance.
No, it's okay. It's probably different things in different countries. So it's like non-governmental organizations. So things that don't get government funding. So charities, basically.
Yeah, right.
I think there is a differentiation, but I don't know what it is. But yeah, I understand that's good. That was good. Profit. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very fair and reasonable explanation. With all these places and ecosystems, biomes, environments that you've been in both above and below the surface, what are some challenges that wildlife is facing that you've experienced?
Climate change. Like I think is the obvious one. But this is something I feel very strongly about because
what does that look like?
I've actually lived places where I've seen it, and I think that's something that's quite important to talk about because a lot of the time climate change is seen as this like silent threat and we don't see the repercussions yet, but we know that we will, and they're going to come in thick and fast, but people aren't seeing them, whereas I've seen them. So in Cape Town, there's been a big water crisis. They've had severe droughts in the last 10 years, one of which there was a genuine threat of the taps just running dry, like turning your taps on one day. They called it day zero, and there being no water coming out.
Sounds ominous.
The only reason it was very ominous, and the only reason that was avoided was because of the actions of the people. Everyone collectively in the city worked to conserve water and to use less water to avoid that, and they managed to avoid it long enough that the rains came eventually, and the drought was kind of ended. But just in general, water scarcity has become a big problem, and that has affected normal people. So, for example, some of the small actions people did was you would shower with buckets. So you would stand in like a bucket or loads of buckets and collect all of your shower water. So your shower water wasn't going down the drain. And then you would use that water through your house. So to do things like flush the toilet, you would use the shower water instead of the manual flush because you're going to use less water. You would use it to water your plants. You would use it for whatever. But obviously there were things like hosepipe bans. And people just came up with really ingenious ways to reuse water and use less water and then reuse the water that they were using. And so the actions of everybody collectively doing that enabled the taps to keep running and the water to be conserved. So that was really cool. But that is an example where people are already being hit by the implications of climate change. And then in the Maldives, I was there during a mass global coral bleaching event. And to very quickly explain what that is, corals are an animal, but they have an algae that lives in their tissue, which is called zooxanthellae, and algae is a plant. So the plant...
Can you say that word again?
Zooxanthellae.
Zooxanthellae. Okay, yes.
Yeah, it's one of my favourite words.
Yeah, that's a great word, zooxanthellae.
In it, which I think is fun.
That's unique. Yeah, to write that one out. Okay, so it's lives zooxanthellae, which lives in the tissue of the corals. Right.
Yes. And the zooxanthellae conducts photosynthesis, and so it creates energy, which is a symbiosis basically with the coral and the algae, because the algae gets the home from the coral, and then the coral takes the energy for nutrients from the algae. Very basic explanation. But when what's happening under a changing climate and warming ocean temperatures is the corals become stressed basically because of the rising temperatures. So the algae abandons the coral and just leaves because it senses this stress, and the coral can't survive without the algae. And this is why we call it bleaching, because the color that we see from the coral is actually from the algae inside the tissue. So when the algae leaves, it leaves the skeleton exposed, which is white. And so the corals appear white, which is why we call it bleaching.
Interesting. Right.
And this then just opens a cascade of problems for the coral that often results in the coral dying. So firstly, they've lost their source of nutrients, which was the algae. So that's a big problem. And then the exposed skeleton is also more vulnerable to disease. So they can, and for other algae to kind of grow on top and just smother and kill the coral. So they can survive bleaching. Like a bleached coral is not a dead coral, but if the algae doesn't come back within a month, maybe less, the corals will likely die. And so often coral bleaching leads to mortality. And this is happening because of rising temperatures, and it is happening more frequently and to a greater extent than previously. So the first global bleaching event that's been documented was in 1998, and then there wasn't another one until 2016. And that was number 1 and number 2. And in 2024, we had number 4. So since 2016, we've had 3. So they're getting more frequent and they're getting more severe. And obviously, there's less coral than there was because a whole bunch died in 2016. And from 1998, it had recovered to about 80%, 70-80%. So it had recovered really well in 2015. And then it all bleached in 2016. So you needed another, 17 years for it to grow back. But because it bleached again in 2019 and then it bleached again in 2024.
And so were these bleaching locations, were they in the same location or was it in different areas?
Yeah, so these were pretty global. So it was most coral reefs, if not all coral reefs around the world. This 2024-2025 bleaching event is still going on, was bad because it hit some of the reefs that had been deemed kind of like last paradise reefs. So a good example, so the Ningaloo was really badly affected in Western Australia. That's been happening in the last few months. It's experienced severe bleaching, and the Ningaloo was a really healthy reef. The Raja Ampat in Indonesia is often heralded as like the last haven of corals, and these reefs are just beautiful and had been much less affected, and they bleached in the last few months. And in the Red Sea, the Gulf of Aqaba off Jordan, that area, a lot of Red Sea corals were also doing better. The water there is a little bit cooler, but they've also started seeing bleaching. So it was pretty much everywhere. There's tropical coral reefs.
Yeah, and there's a lot of devastation from what it sounds like. 2 things. Is there... if you could boil everything down, every piece of information you know about why the coral bleaching, about the rising temperatures, about the global climate issue, if you could boil everything down, what would you bring it down to at its finest point? What would you boil it down to? And from that, do you see hope and a way forwards from this?
I think that it's largely down to like the rising temperature, the climate changing, global warming is a result of human activity, particularly related to our dependence on fossil fuels and the fossil fuel economy. We know this, burning fossil fuels is warming our atmosphere, and a warming of our atmosphere is what's warming our oceans. And so we know that. I think the biggest thing to prevent further damage is to stop burning fossil fuels. So we need to shift to create greener and more renewable economies. Well, greener economies using renewable energies, and to reduce our reliance on things like oil and gas. The hope question is such a difficult one because I don't like to be pessimistic. I like to try and stay optimistic.
You're a very positive person, yes.
Yeah, I am. And I try to stay optimistic, particularly publicly, as a kind of social media person. I try to not be negative. Like I've started a new series on my Instagram sharing good news because I'm sick of seeing terrible news all the time.
Terrible news.
Whenever I open social media. So I've started making once a week like a good news wildlife story post to cheer myself up primarily. But if I'm being honest, I do have days, months, periods of really just dire pessimism, particularly after I left the Maldives. When I saw the extent of the bleaching, I did feel very like, what can we actually do about this? And the reason I really hit a lull after that was because we knew that the bleaching was going to happen, and it still happened. And we knew for a long time that there was going to be a global bleaching event in 2024. And I felt very demotivated by the fact that we knew it was going to happen, we knew how bad it was going to be, and we knew what the repercussions would be of that for the marine ecosystem, for people's livelihoods. And it still happened. And it made me I think had a slightly naive maybe, or slightly optimistic. I put a lot of value on knowledge. I was like, knowledge is important. If we know things, that's useful. And I think what's happening at the moment with the political climate primarily with the political climate is that knowledge is not what it used to be, and that we can know stuff and still just do nothing about it. And it blows my mind that we didn't do anywhere near enough, and it felt almost like we didn't even try to stop that crisis from happening, even though we knew it was going to happen. We had all the information we could have needed. We knew exactly what was going to happen. We predicted it so well, and it all came to pass. And so I think that's something that the pessimism kind of comes in at the moment with the political climate. And I don't know if that's also, again, it becomes something quite difficult to talk about because people don't really like to talk about politics. But unfortunately, conservation is extremely
but it's important.
Political.
I think it's still important to be discussed.
It is, and it's relevant. And unfortunately, you can't do one without the other. And this is something that I do try to say to people, because I'm quite a political person. Like, I'm very interested in politics, both like domestically and internationally. And I have posted political stuff in the past on my social medias, and I've had backlash for it. And I then just always try to say, can't win. Yeah, can't win. But I'm like, what do you expect from a conservationist? Like, why would you assume a conservationist would be apolitical? Because politics is embedded into the industry. Everything we do is political. Because climate change is one of the number one political issues, if not, for a lot of voters, but also for just our species. It's the biggest existential threat we've ever faced. That is political. And so, of course, anyone working in this field is going to be political. And I think it's slightly disingenuous to just post happy, nice, and not ever talk about the bigger context, the global picture, because it's relevant.
Interesting.
Particularly related to climate change, because climate change is an issue that will exacerbate existing problems. Like, as the world gets hotter, it's just going to get, everything that's already a problem is just going to get worse, but it's also perpetuated by existing problems. So a big example is like war is very, very bad for climate change. Like, war, that's not the number one issue.
I would like to point out as well, war generally is not great for anything.
Exactly. And I'm not here saying that we shouldn't have wars because of climate. We should not have wars because there are a lot of reasons that come before that. The humanitarian crisis is definitely the first one. But
one of them.
It's relevant that the act of a lot of these conflicts are releasing a lot of carbon. And a lot of, Donald Trump literally ran his campaign with drill, baby, drill. He had fossil fuels as part of his campaign. So these things are political.
What do you think about the thought? Because we're talking about carbon 14 or carbon 12, like the carbon dioxide was what we're talking about.
Yeah,
the carbon dioxide.
Yeah, greenhouse gases.
And like I've heard that it's that's everyone knows, but I've heard like with carbon dioxide, plants, that's a food source for plants. And so we would, if there's more carbon dioxide in the air, is there any evidence that you know of that the plants are actually doing better because of carbon dioxide?
I was actually listening to something and I wish I could quote it properly. I can't quite remember the other day, but basically that is a myth, that it's better for plants to have more carbon dioxide. I think I can't remember exactly what it was, but I can try
So
and
more
find
food
it,
is not
send
good.
it to you. Yeah, well, they
Yeah,
turn
do
carbon
please.
dioxide.
Yeah.
Plants kind of through photosynthesis kind of turn carbon dioxide into oxygen.
Right.
And other things.
Yes.
That's a massive simplification. But I think one of the things at the moment is that we're producing greenhouse gases in a quantity and concentration that's not beneficial for plants.
Non-beneficial. Yeah, okay.
But it is also true that deforestation is, again, these are problems that are exacerbating each other because we're removing plants. We're removing, like with the Amazon, often heralded as the lungs of the planet. They have a huge capacity to absorb CO2 and we're removing them. So it is definitely true that having things like rainforests would be beneficial to help tackle rising CO2 levels. One example I can think of, which semi-answers your question, is a phenomenon known as bush encroachment, which is happening in savanna ecosystems. It's happening in Africa. I would imagine it's happening in Australia as well, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Which is basically the rise of woody vegetation in grassland ecosystems. So I would imagine, Australia, maybe parts of America that have grasslands are experiencing this, but I'll speak about it in an African context because that's what I know about. In a savanna ecosystem, which is largely grassland, what we are seeing with, which is believed to be a response to rising CO2 levels, is an increase in woody vegetation in grassland ecosystems. So what that means is things like trees and shrubs, which are spreading into the grassland, but the grass has nowhere to go. So it's actually, we're losing grassland environments. And there are a lot of species that are either specialists to grassland environments or just live only purely in grassland environments. So we will potentially, we are like eroding that ecosystem basically. And that could have knock-on effects for other things. And so it's this idea that one ecosystem is being negatively impacted, but that's a natural, unquote, response to climate change, kind of, because the plants are doing that themselves, but they wouldn't be doing that if we weren't warming the planet. So
interesting.
It's an interesting phenomenon.
I mean, there's the you've got the evidence of trees expanding out. We've got this rising temperatures around the world. Is that an assumed correlation, or is there scientific evidence to actually points that is the reason why this isn't happening?
I think at the moment it's a assumed correlation. I think it's it's this belief that it's a response to rising CO2 levels, but I'd have to double check the science of course. On this. I'm not sure.
Just curious, because and you can totally send and if you want to add anything from our conversation, you can totally send it through, and I can put links up in the conversation in the description of the episode, because it's very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think that's just one example, but I think there's definitely examples where ecosystems are changing as a response to climate change, and the effects of that will be seen not just within the ecosystems, but also for humans as well. Like our economies, our societies will be impacted as well by this. We've started to see that more in equatorial regions, but it's going to spread
as well. Okay. And that's very interesting. And you said like you don't like to be much of a doom and gloom person. Like you try and stay very positive about what's going on. You're doing this new series on your social media about finding that one good thing of that week and to bring up the vibes and the hope. Could we maybe move into and hear a little bit about why you want to look at the positives, like who you are as a person? Like part of this podcast is hearing about about listening to experts about how and why they do what they do, and why do you do what you do, Kate? And could you maybe even after that, why do you do what you do? Because the why is super important. One of the things I think you said in our previous conversations, to know your why, to know where to go is extremely important in trying to figure out what career path to take. That was one of the things I believe you pointed out and said that you believe is extremely important for people to figure out. and to look into. So why do you do what you do? And then as well as what was it, has this always been something that you've been interested in?
Yeah, I think with the positivity angle, I think it is important to stay positive to stay motivated, to kind of come into what you were also talking about. I think if you succumb to the idea that there's nothing, that it's all negative and there's nothing we can do, then obviously your motivation is just going to tank. And I don't think we're at the point where there's nothing we can do. I think we are reaching the points where some of our actions will be irreversible, but not all of them. And that doesn't mean that we just accept that everything has to fail because we failed in this one thing.
Yeah, it's not just give up. Yeah, right.
Yeah, I do kind of try to stay positive for that, but it is hard sometimes in this environment to fully. So I don't want to paint a false picture that it's all like positive all the time, because I definitely do have moments of despair. But I, in terms of why I do what I do, so I and yes, it has always been what I wanted to do. So I, from a very young age, always wanted to work with animals. Love animals. If you're watching this on video, you can see behind me, I've always had an interest. There is evidence. And so I wanted to be a vet when I was a child, because I didn't know that was the only career working with animals that I was exposed to. I grew up in quite a metropolitan area, and my school was quite traditional in terms of what it suggested people do for careers. So I just wanted to be a vet, but I hated chemistry. I was terrible at chemistry and I hated it. And in the UK, to do veterinary medicine, you have to be very good at chemistry and you have to do chemistry A-level, which was never going to happen. I think early on, collectively, myself and my teachers were like, unrealistic goal. So I had to rethink, and I kind of discovered the world of conservation, and I was like, right, that's what I want to do. And I haven't really.
How did you discover
since.
that? You said it was like something you discovered. Actually, two things. I want to hear about why you discovered, like how you discovered it. Conservation. How did you come across that?
Yeah. So I feel like I'm going off on a lot of tangents, but I'm a bit of a yapper. So I discovered conservation. Well, I think I always knew it existed from documentaries. Shout out to David Attenborough. An ever presence in my growing up was watching David Attenborough documentaries on repeat. And I often, in his documentaries, particularly the later ones, he would at the end show the behind the scenes of how they film stuff. So he would show the conservationists that they worked with. And I always was like, that's so cool. But often, rightly so, it was, him showing really cool environments that were not in London, England, and the people that they were interviewing were locals to their environment. Yeah, which absolutely rightly so. I think that's great. I think it's great that the BBC was highlighting the role of local Indigenous knowledge through their documentaries. But I therefore just thought, oh, well, there's no conservation in London, so, which is not true. There is, but at the time I didn't know that. And I thought, oh, I can't do this. This isn't a job for someone like me. And I think as I grew up, I obviously realised that that's absolutely not true, and visas exist, and you can
indeed
also you can do conservation in the UK, and you can work remotely, and all these things. Anyway, but I went to South Africa when I was 17 on an expedition with a company called Earthwatch, which was targeted towards British students doing their A-levels, and it was a kind of government program to help young people get into science and get experience with science. So you had to apply and all of this stuff. And I managed to go, and it was studying scavengers, which was a bit random, but really, really interesting and really cool.
Yes.
And I
visited like hyenas, that kind of thing.
Yeah, hyenas, vultures, that kind of thing.
Awesome.
And I went out to this reserve in South Africa called WILDLIFE Reserve, and I had the best time. And there was a young British guy working there, and there was another young British guy doing his PhD out there, and we worked with him a lot because he was doing his PhD on hyenas. And it was really cool because I was like, oh, they were in their early 20s, and I was like, oh, they're from where I'm from, and they're doing this. Like, I want to do this. And so that was really inspiring. And then also meeting the South African team running this reserve, who to this day are some of the most incredible conservationists I've ever met, and I still work with them now. They just really inspired me and really opened my world up to conservation. And I came back from that trip and was like, right, I want to be a wildlife conservationist. And so that's why I did geography, because with the A-levels I was doing, that made the most sense. And then I went on to do conservation biology, and we go from there. And I've been back to that reserve. I've worked there for a bit. I'm working with them on a project at the moment. I'm partnered with them for a social media trip. So it's all come full circle now, 10 years later, which is very cool. But that's kind of how I discovered conservation. Well, not discovered conservation, but realized it was something that I could do.
Something viable.
Something viable for me.
For yourself.
And I've had a lot of luck. Like, it's not an easy industry. I've had a lot of luck. I've also worked very hard. I was lucky in a lot of ways to have had that experience at such a young age, because I then built up my experience while I was studying, which is often like the hardest thing for people to do. So I was lucky that I started building that network, I guess, at 17. So I give a lot of credit to that Earthwatch trip. But that, was definitely a big factor. And I also
big part of it.
To come back to one of your earlier questions, I really do feel like I'm zooming around a lot, but I mean,
it makes sense. I'm following.
Yeah, hopefully it will make sense to the listeners. One of your earlier questions, when you asked about what challenges wildlife is facing. So on that trip, I learned about rhino poaching, and this reserve in particular, very vocal about the rhino poaching crisis and are very much on the front line of it. And it just really devastated me. Again, to give a very, very quick overview, rhino horn is made of keratin, which is what like hair and fingernails are made out of. But
and snake scales too.
Oh yeah. Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yes, fun fact.
That is a fun fact. I'm not big on snakes, but I love them. I think they're so cool, but my knowledge is rubbish. So that is a very fun fact.
Yeah.
Wow.
There's more to know, but yes, so they're made out of keratin.
Yes, so which is literally hair, but in cultures, particularly in kind of South Asian culture or in Chinese culture, Hong Kong, places like that, but other countries as well, it's believed in traditional medicine to have medicinal properties. Yeah, so it is of all kinds. So it's believed from everything from kind of headache cures to cancer treatments to Viagra. Like it's kind of this like magical powder that has is kind of believed to solve all these different treatments. And so it's extremely high value. And this has led to poaching of rhinos in order to take the horns, ship the horns to these places where people will pay a huge premium for it because they believe it has medicinal value. And this has led to a huge decline in rhino populations across Africa, largely due to poaching. And obviously they are threatened by other things like habitat fragmentation, climate change, all the things that's threatening the wider ecosystem. But their numbers have particularly declined because they've been, so heavily targeted by poaching. And this...
Can I ask, is there any evidence that these medicinal properties actually are in the horns? Is there any like scientific evidence for this, or is it just wishy-washy kind of ideas?
Yeah, there's no scientific evidence based on Western medicine. that they have any properties. So no, it is kind of factually inaccurate to say they have medicinal value. However, obviously there are cases that people say to keep them alive. It's very faith-based. And so as a white British person, I don't really like saying it's not real, because it's a belief that is the belief is older than Christianity. It's something that people have, it's a custom and tradition that has been kept alive for thousands of years by people, and it's their traditions and it's their kind of based on their traditional culture. And so they're to kind of come in and say they're wrong, I think is, and to really simplify it, is just icky and not really for us to do. Education, I think, is important because I do think there's also an massive ethical issue in promoting the sale of something that we don't believe works. Like, I think it's horrible that poaching syndicates, which is a massive criminal network, it's equivalent to arms dealers, they are selling these products to desperate people who have family members that are dying and telling them, buy this for this huge amount of money and it will save them, when it won't. The placebo effect is a thing. So, you know, sometimes people do get better because of the placebo effect, but the mind is strong. Yes, there is no scientific evidence at all that keratin helps cure any illness, because if rhino horn did, then so would this, and so would our fingernails. It's the same material, so there's nothing to suggest that would be true. But these beliefs are extremely old and extremely, you know, well held. I think
ingrained
a lot of educational
programs, their societies.
Definitely. And there are educational programs going on, but I think it's unrealistic to expect them to convince people to believe something that's older than Christianity to suddenly stop believing it, because, I mean, and I think it's particularly arrogant for people from like European or Western countries to go in and say this isn't real, because they could turn around to us and say, well, half of your beliefs aren't real, you don't have any evidence either, and that would be true. So we can't pretend that we are a society that deals only in absolute fact, and that there's an othering there, because that's, you know, they'll come and say, why do you spend all that money on these church buildings then, and what are we going to reply? So I think my opinion is the kind of hammering the point that it's not real is not where the solution needs to lie necessarily.
It's not beneficial in your eyes.
I think it's important, but I think it has to come from within. Like, I don't think I'm the right person to deliver that message. But it is an important note that there is no medicinal value. And so these killings of the rhinos are worthless. But I don't blame the consumer on the other end. I guess that's the main point I want to make, is what
you're trying to get across. Yeah.
Yeah. I blame the people who run the criminal networks. So this, as I said, is equivalent to arms deals. It's a very complicated issue. I could talk about this for hours. But it's an international criminal network. What do they call those? A
syndicate, you said?
Yeah.
Before?
Yeah. Like the kind of like drugs similar to drugs and arms dealing, like criminal, like gangs, I guess.
Stuff. Yes.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like that.
I think I do. It's
there's a word for what you call those like groups of criminals, but I can't remember what it is. Anyway, it's like that. And so it's
and not like a murder of crows. Is that what you're talking about? That kind of thing? Yeah.
That kind of thing. Yeah. Like a collective noun. But anyway, they're just awful people, because often the actual poachers as well are not really to blame, because these are people that are being blackmailed or are being offered a route out of poverty if they do this one,
interesting,
kill this one rhino. You know, they're being paid a huge amount of money. So versus what they would earn equivalently in the job that they have, if they have a job. So things like unemployment play into this. These criminals kind of utilize the desperation of people in rural areas to say, go poach a rhino and we'll pay you 4 times what you would earn annually from sheep farming or whatever it is. And I don't blame those people for doing it. Sometimes they are blackmailed because, as I said, these are criminal gangs. Like, they will maybe kidnap their family or threaten to do so. And so I don't blame the poachers.
Also part of it as well.
Yeah. I don't blame the consumers at the other end, because they are just following things that they believe, and they are often desperate, particularly the people who are buying it for things like cancer treatment. And you're going to just try anything in the hope that it's going to
desperation work. Calls for desperate measures kind of thing.
Exactly. So you kind of you blame the middleman and the criminals that are orchestrating this whole thing. But the point is that the rhino poaching crisis is driving these iconic species to extinction, and just getting able to work with the people on the front line and like seeing the insane work that has to go in every single day to keep these animals alive. Like you have to be on their protection 24/7, and it's dangerous. You're fighting a much bigger enemy that has, like, rhino poachers, you know, if they do come in, they have guns, they have weapons, like it's dangerous, and people are putting their life on the line to keep these animals safe. And I just think for me, it really epitomized the biodiversity crisis, because it's so avoidable. We do not need to be poaching these animals. There's no good reason for it. It's completely avoidable. It's sort of like a metaphor for greed and exploitation, both of people and of resources. It's people being exploited on both ends, like their beliefs and their vulnerability being exploited for rich people to get richer, to just make more money. And it's corruption. It's everything wrong with the world really is really shown in rhino poaching. Like, it's an incredible metaphor for the biodiversity crisis as a whole, and also a lot of political crises. And so it was a really interesting first thing to learn about within conservation, because I was like, God, this is a huge problem. And this is just one animal. And it somehow is leaching across continents. It's affecting people from all different walks of life. It's affecting multiple animals, because rhinos are a flagship species. And it was a really interesting, like, first thing to learn about conservation. So I feel like it's always stayed with me. And so that experience was a really interesting way to get into the industry, because I'll always come back to that and be like, well, while this is going on, we can't stop.
Yeah, you have to keep going. And you said that's like a big part for you. That was a big moment. Can we go from a little bit earlier? If we could go like a bit of an overview of what your life, a couple of your life experiences. What if you look back at your life from maybe as far back as you can remember? Are there any pivotal moments or moments that stand out to you as something that really imprinted into yourself and in becoming who you are today?
Yeah, I think more like personal life and like childhood things was I am very close. I have a really amazing family, and I'm very privileged in the family that I have. They are just cool people. It's a big family, and we've all been through a lot together and individually, but I've always been very lucky to be surrounded by people that are just like kind and inspiring and nice. And my parents in particular have always been had a big impact on me. They're both really cool people. They have both traveled a lot, and my sister and I both traveled a lot, and I think we get that from them. My dad had a very international upbringing. They've both been through a lot in their lives, but they've always just been happy people, and they've always kind of had a sort of can-do attitude towards things, and been very supportive of all of the crazy things that I have done.
Great.
Most parents, I think, would potentially be like, oh my God, what is she doing? But my parents have always been very big cheerleaders.
Very supportive of that.
My sister's always been a huge supporter as well. So I've been very I think I've been lucky, because I think the family I have is fun, and they have a very free-spirited attitude. And I think some of that does come from going through a lot, but it's always right. I'm the baby, so I'm the young one, so I've always had these adults to look up to who have always just kept a smile on their face throughout everything. And so I think it's really been like lovely to grow up around. In terms of
that sounds awesome.
A pivotal moment in my career, when I was very young, so when I was 18. So after the Earthwatch trip, the year later, I went back to Manquay with a bunch of the people that I'd volunteered with the first time, because we all got on really well. We'd never met before, but we had the best time, and they're still some of my best friends to this day. We went back, and we just went back as volunteers to the same reserve a year later. And something happened on that trip that has always stayed with me. And it's motivated me ever since. And it's related to the rhino poaching crisis. So between the two trips in that year, so this was 2014, end of 2014, Manco was hit by rhino poachers. For the first time, they lost rhinos to poachers, and one of the rhinos that was killed had a 6-month-old calf, and this calf ran away, so it escaped the poachers and was essentially adopted by her older brother. So the social dynamics of rhinos are like fascinating, and
interesting.
I don't think anyone fully understands their social spectrum, because I've seen them.
So they're quite caring.
They can be. I mean, I think people don't. The kind of behavioral studies of them, I don't think have fully captured. I think this is a slight tangent, but I do think it depends on the population, because of the poaching crisis. Now, rhinos basically only live in isolated populations that are fenced, because the fencing is an anti-poaching measure. And I think that has altered their social dynamics, because within that enclosed area, they all kind of know each other, and they'll like have little groups that they go around in. And I think there can be quite a lot of politics within their little groups. And I think the extent of that is kind of unknown, but also the effect of the like kind of fortress style conservation of having them in enclosed spaces, like how much is that impacting their natural social behaviors? Not really sure. I'm not really sure anyway. Someone might know. There might be a lot of research on this that I've just missed. But anyway, this was, I think, quite a unique thing where a male sub-adult, he was only about 3, adopted his little sister, and she was only 6 months old. And rhino calves typically stay with their mothers on their mother's milk for about 18 months. So he was very, very young to not have access to milk. But her older brother sort of became her protector. So when we went back the following year, this was about 8 months after the poaching, and the calf started to get very weak, and you could see that not having mother's milk was really a problem.
Was impacting it, yeah.
Some of the adult males started attacking her, and so she was moved into, with her brother, was moved into an enclosure to kind of keep her safe. But extremely tragically, she ended up passing away while I was there. And we'd all worked really hard to build this enclosure and get her there, and it had been like this big team effort, and it felt like a real win. And then she died, and then we watched a rhino grieve, and it was just the most like profound, insane thing. And I am not a very like faith-based or like woo-woo person, and I say that with no disrespect at all to anyone who is like, believe whatever you want to believe. I fully support it, but I'm just not someone who's particularly spiritual or religious. And I can imagine people listening to this and kind of saying like, you're crazy. But we watched this rhino grieve, and I'm also against anthropomorphizing animals, like attributing human traits to animals, but there's just no other way to describe it. So originally he wouldn't leave her body. He would just stand there. He wouldn't leave the enclosure. And then when they did get him to leave, he ran off and disappeared. And then he wasn't seen for days. And people were actively looking for him to make sure he was okay. And then we found him. And I will never forget this. He was just stood in a bush, just staring at a tree. He wasn't moving. He wasn't eating. He wasn't doing anything. He was just stood staring at a tree. And it was the most heartbreaking sight. And I was like, God, he's devastated. Like, he's really sad. And and we were all really sad. And oh my God, like he knows what's happened. I just felt like he knew, my mum's been killed. I've had to look after my sister, and now she's dead too because these people killed my mum. And now what do I do? And he was young, and it was awful. And the other reason this was really impactful for me was because that one poaching event, the knock-on effects were still being felt a year later. So there were two rhinos killed in the poaching event, another one that was shot that ended up not surviving. And then one of the rhino shot was pregnant. So we lost that calf. And then this other calf died. So one night killed 5 rhinos, plus the potential reproduction of all of them. And I was like, God, that one shot, essentially, or 2 shots, are still impacting 7 months later. It's just like, it just ripples. And I found that really sad and really difficult.
Having that awareness of one moment impacting so much further ahead in time. Yeah, right.
Yeah. And just the actions of humans and the impacts it's having are so much bigger than just one horn being shipped off to someone in Asia. I will, just to pick things up a bit, this has like a somewhat happy ending because that rhino, his name is Sweet Chili, he's still alive. I have a tattoo of him. He's now a dominant bull. He's doing extremely well. He has a son. Yeah. So he's reproducing.
Okay, he's picking back up the lost.
You know, it's 9 years later and he's okay. But I think it was just a very like formative experience because
it really impacted you. You say.
Yeah, really, really did, and it's always been a big motivator for me. That story, that experience, to work in this industry and to never really be able to do anything else. And now I think I would add the bleaching on a similar level, not quite
something that's been pretty
the
meaningful.
same, but just a sort of, I can't see those things and then do something else, like not do this job, because it's
kind of like a duty. Do you feel?
Yeah, I just feel like if I tried to do something else, I would just always think about those and be like, oh, but what about them? And I just think I guess a little bit duty bound, a little bit just, I think a lot of people who don't engage with conservation for whatever reason, people have busy lives. I totally appreciate that. But once you know about it, I think it's really hard to not. And I think that's the same for a lot of crises. And I think people who work in like humanitarian relief or international human rights, once you see some of the things that go on, you can't unsee it.
But
you
do
can't.
Something.
Yeah, exactly. And once you know the extent of it, you wouldn't go back. And I think a lot of us, if we saw, for example, what landfill sites actually look like, or the impact landfill sites have on local communities, I think that if we could do like a field trip to take people there, they would stop shopping fast fashion a lot faster than if we just do these like ad campaigns every now and then to say, oh, we should stop renewably. I think if people have that understanding and awareness, there's a good David Attenborough quote about this, but like people will want to protect what they understand. And if you've had those firsthand experiences, it's much easier to understand what that actually is. And I don't blame people who haven't, because why would you have if you but
you don't understand the value of it, right?
Yeah. But I do think once you have had those experiences, it's quite hard to go back. And so they will always be a big motivator. And to come back to what you said earlier, like our previous conversation, we were talking about having a reason for
as one thing I was going to say.
Yeah. So this has always been, that's why I have the tattoo. I have one tattoo and it's of Sweet Chili, and it's a motivator for me, but it's also, it's kind of reminding me of that story, but also that it had a happy ending and that we can keep going. But I also think you need a reason, but you need more than one, because on the days where you feel like there's no hope, you need another reason to keep going. And I should also say, and I always try to say this, is that don't think that I'm this like selfless person, because I love it. So I love this job. I take great enjoyment from it. I've had incredible experiences. I've got to see things and animals and places that most 28-year-olds would not have had the opportunity to see. And I've got to do crazy things for free.
Yeah, and your social media is good evidence of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not here being like, I've given up my life to selflessly dedicate to others. Like, no, that's... it's just, don't want to be like that. It's not true. Like, yes, a lot of my motivation comes because I genuinely do want to help. I want to make a difference, and I want to stop these sad and awful and dangerous things from happening. But I do also really enjoy it. And when I am out working in the field, I'm very like high energy. I like long days. I'm like busyness and stuff. And like people say, oh, you like keen to do everything, and I'm like, no, it's because I genuinely really enjoy it. Like, this is my idea of fun. So
keen, yeah, because it's fun. Yeah, that's great. That's a good kind of fun that to enjoy, and then to be able to do it. It's totally awesome. You so that's a bit of your why. That sounds like some foundational points of your why, Kate. You were saying also, like, well, I'd mentioned that you can see, I've seen some of the stuff that you do on your social media. Like, social media is a big part of your life, and that's kind of somewhat of a new-ish thing. I think you said it's somewhat fresh. What does that look like for you? What you're doing this? You've kind of explained your why, so you understand why you're doing it. Maybe a little bit on how you're doing it. I think is interesting as well, because obviously you're giving a message, you're creating value, bringing value to people in such a way that is getting attention. You have, I think, 160,000 followers on Instagram, and who knows how many where else. But how are you doing this? We understand your why, but how are you doing this?
Well, thank you for the kind words. Relatively new and always ever changing, as is the world of social media. But I kind of, in terms of how, I mean, it's comes from a science communication angle of I wanted to be able to reach people. I also, as I have said, I just enjoy talking about wildlife and conservation, and I was doing that anyway, and so I was like, I need an outlet that is specifically tailored to me being able to talk about conservation, and that's, I guess, why. I think social media is a great way to reach people and to showcase different things. It can also be a not great place because you're not always in control of what people see and algorithms, and it's all very complicated and difficult sometimes. But it's, I think, just the simple act of like making a piece of content. So when I was in the Maldives, I did a lot of vlogging. So I would just post what my day looked like in short form videos, and slightly longer ones on TikTok. I have a much smaller audience there, but because I really don't understand how TikTok works. On Instagram, just like short videos of like, this is what I did today. And I think that really resonated with people, for people who wanted to do a similar job, but also who were interested in when people say they work in wildlife, or when people say they're marine biologists, like, what does that mean? I always find this really interesting, because like, especially my friends from school and my friends from uni who have, I don't know, you ever have these memes where you're like, I don't know what my best friend does, but I can tell you all of her trauma. I can list everyone she's ever went on a date with. I know all of her cousins' names, but what does she do every day for 8 hours? Couldn't tell you, have absolutely no idea. And I feel like that about almost all of my friends who don't have a similar job to me. I'm like, yes, they are a consultant. I don't know what that means. And so I think it's cool for people to show what they do in their day. And I think by doing that, it's a cool way to like inspire people who want to do a similar thing, but also to like humanize conservation. And I think conservation and environmental issues are, as we've talked about, becoming very politicized. And I think sometimes it's just nice to just show the person behind the job. And what I've realized with social media, and what I would recommend to people, is that people care about other people a lot more than they care about anything else. And they care about themselves primarily, but then they also care about other people. So if you want to make wildlife content, you've got to show yourself. Like a lot of the time, people are more interested in you than they are in the actual wildlife. People responded really well to me showing my day versus videos of just the coral. I personally think the coral is way more interesting than I am, but I think people are more interested in
what's that microbe? Zooxanthellae. Yes, that one.
Yeah,
that's a good
way
one.
More interesting than me.
Way more interesting.
But apparently, like, I think people to see what you do. So that's one of the hows. As I said, I also kind of try and promote a bit of positivity. So yeah, I'm starting to do more like good news stories. I also do some rants, like just relatable things. I think the kind of goal, I guess, is to showcase the career and then also help inspire people and hopefully bring some of these issues to people's phones, which would then seep into their minds, and they might think to be a bit more sustainable in their choices where they can be, or to factor in some of the stuff that they've learned. And through building this platform, I'm also now able to run trips. So I'm actually taking people to South Africa to see the rhinos, which is
awesome.
so cool. So cool. And that would be amazing if I could do more like trips to actually like physically take people there to see conservation projects. Like that's very, very cool.
What does that look like? What does that look like? How, if someone's wants to get in contact with you, how are they going to do that? And also, how do you facilitate that? Is this a site like is this a form of business for yourself, or what's that? What is this space for you?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So I never expected it, and I know everyone who has a following says this, but I genuinely never expected to grow a following this big. And I am just like a research scientist. I am not a businesswoman, and I'm a really bad businesswoman. So it is a business, but like I think I need direction and help on how to like make it a proper business, to be honest. But in terms of the trips, so the first trip, my first ever trip is this year. It's in July, and I'm going to Thankyou, to where I went in 2014. And as I said, I've maintained a relationship with them. And it's really cool because that's like where I started. So I'm taking people, and this has just been advertised through my social media, and we've booked it up, and it's really exciting. We do have, at the time of recording, we have one potential space left. I don't know if it will be gone by the time this goes out, but I can tell you before if you want.
Yes.
But yeah, that was just through social media. And I'm hoping to do more. I would love to do some in the marine space as well, because I know a lot of the people who follow me came from my time in the Maldives. But yeah, there is scope for kind of business. I mean, I guess typical like influencery things, but as I said, I'm not very good at that side of things. But it is what it is.
So you do, yeah. So you said influency things. What is influency that influency things? What does that look like?
I guess things like brand deals, which I have done a little bit of, but I think because of who I am as a person and the nature of the content that I make, I'm extremely fussy about brands. Like I would never be like work with just some random brand. Like it has to be someone who is making conscious efforts to have sustainable supply chains and ethical business practices and supporting conservation in some ways. So, and those brands tend to not have huge budgets for influencer marketing, which I totally understand. So, I limit myself, but if it's not somewhere I would genuinely spend money, I'm not going to promote it for other people to spend money. That's crazy. So
yeah, fair.
I don't know.
Fair, good. So you're being intentional. You're not just selling for the sake of selling. You care about the quality that you give to your followers.
Yeah, definitely. That's really important to me. So one of the ways I would love though to kind of more monetize the platform is through things like creator funds. So my biggest platform is on Instagram, and as I said, I'm moving more onto TikTok, and there's a lot more potential to monetize TikTok, whereas I think you can only monetize Instagram in terms of like just being paid to post if you live in the US. And there's absolutely no chance I'm moving to the US.
No chance.
No disrespect to any Americans listening. I'm sure any Americans listening to this would understand why. Like if you're listening to a Wildlife podcast,
you just love the UK. You just love the UK.
Yeah, I just love the UK. I mean, the UK is not ideal either, but unfortunately I'm a citizen here, whereas like the US, at least not until they have a new president. Let's just say that. Yeah, I mean, you can't monetize Instagram basically, and but you can monetize TikTok. So I'm trying to grow my TikTok. So if anyone's listening, please follow me on TikTok. I post vlogs of what I do there, and I at the moment I'm working largely remotely, so I'm trying to also vlog that because I want to kind of be realistic that when you work in conservation, it's not always beautiful places. Sometimes I'm just in my dressing gown writing papers and reading
at like 2 a.m. in the morning. Yeah,
exactly. Like it's not all super glamorous all the time, but I'm also waiting at the moment because I'm waiting to hear about funding for a new project, which would be amazing. And I don't know how funding is going to go. So I'm trying to, monetize my social media platforms to hopefully help fund this project, these research projects, which I can't really talk about, which is not ideal, but I hope that, like, trust me, it's secret. Ethical scientific research.
That's good.
So trust if you want to, so anyone listening, Conservation Kate on TikTok, please help me monetize.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, put that in the description. Yeah.
Yeah, completely shameless promotion there, but it's free for them.
Do it.
But to answer your question quickly, the how is mostly vlogs, good news, but just bringing that conversation to people's phones.
Yeah, well, and that's the simplistic side of it, and monetarily you're making something, but it's not sustaining yourself as of yet. Is that kind of, I guess, looking forwards? I'm curious, what does it look like for your career, but and social media as well? Do you plan on? Is it foreseeable that social media will end up being a very good source of income for yourself to be able to live sustainably and do what you love doing? With that, what is like an end goal of yours?
This, I think, is such an interesting question because I never want to be like a full-time social media content creator for two reasons. The first one is that my content has always been about the job, and if I then stopped doing the job and just did content, I'd have to make, I don't know what I would make content about, or I would be actively going out of my way to like orchestrate situations that I can make content about. So going on trips to do to be around wildlife or something. So I just feel like it would be a bit inauthentic. And I have followed a few people in the past, not necessarily in the wildlife space, but just like interesting people who vlogged their jobs, and then they became got huge followings, became full-time influencers, and now their vlogs are really boring. And like, we followed them because I was interested to see your life outside your 9 to 5, or your cool job that you had that was really unique. And now they're just influencers and it's not as interesting to watch. So I would never want to do that because I don't know what I would make content about. But the second reason is that I just feel like I've worked too hard to then not stay in this field. And as I've mentioned, I love it. And you can definitely have a career in conservation as a content creator. Like, there's definitely scope to just be a full-time science communicator, content creator. And those are super cool. I follow a bunch of them, and they're not orchestrating situations to make content. They are full-time creators. But because my content is about being a research biologist, I need to be a research biologist in order to make that content. But I've studied a lot. I've worked really hard. This project that I'm waiting to hear funding about, I've poured everything into. And so if I can do all of those things, I want to keep doing them. So I don't want to sidestep too much and then just become I say just as if it's not a really cool job, but to become a content creator and like abandon all the research experience that I've tried really hard to build up.
Yeah, you still value that. Yeah.
But long term, I would definitely like it to be, I think, like monetarily, and it's always awkward talking about money, but to be fully transparent, monetarily, I do think it could become and I would like it to become a better source of income, because a lot of the projects that I gravitate towards are really badly funded, and conservation in general is really poorly funded, and that is a problem. And I don't want to contribute to that problem, but at the same time, like, we're all just individuals. So if I could just kind of self-fund my day-to-day life through social media, and then reserve funding for projects to go towards the research, or go towards the conservation, then that would be great. So I think it could definitely help me have more of a sustainable life, and be able to work with projects that I really want to work with, if I could kind of some of my income be derived from social media.
Supplementary, yeah.
But at the moment, I would say it's not as much as it could be, because like I said, I'm fussy about who I work with. So hopefully,
and so should
like
good
vlogging. Yeah,
respect. Awesome.
Thanks. But
Long term. How about past
long
social media? Past social media, what are we looking at?
So I want to stay in the research space. I would love to do a PhD. I want to build up research experience and focus on different things. I do want to work more with rhinos, but I definitely want to. The other thing I love about the social media is it does allow me to work across a myriad of ecosystems. Like I can post about anything I want. So I can post about snakes. I could post about polar bears, but be working with coral, be working with rhinos. So I like that as well because it allows me to keep up the interest across a range of ecosystems. But I do want to do more research within. I want to work with rhinos, to be honest. I just love them. But I want to continue.
That's it, yeah.
Continue building my research experience. Like I said, I'd love to do a PhD. I would love to do that more. And then long term, I see myself going more into policy. So I would love to then work in applying research principles to effective policy. So organizations that do things like this, like the United Nations Environment Programme or the IUCN, that are more on the policy side and just translating that into legislation or taking that to governments. But I don't want to do that yet for two reasons. One of them is a selfish reason, which is that I love being in the field and I want to be with the animals. I want to be where they are. So I want to keep doing that while I'm young and I don't have any dependence or any anchors to anything. And then the second is because I think to be someone who translates research into policy, you need to have a really good understanding of research. And so I want to build that up as while I'm young. And like I'm 28 now. I've been doing my Earthwatch trip was when I was 17. So I've been doing this for 10, 11 years. But as we said, there's been bumps in the road. There was a pandemic that we all lost a year and a bit of our lives to. And there's no straight line. And I definitely feel like I have so much still to learn. So I want to keep learning and growing before I work in the policy side.
But you're feeling confident that you've got a direction. And has this always been something that you felt like pretty sure, like you want to move into policies? Like when did this picture that you've just described, when did that come about for you?
So I think I have always known without knowing. It makes sense for me. So when I was younger, in between the vet and conservation stage, the other thing that I always thought about doing was law. This was slightly because it was just something that was like in my face. Like I know lawyers, like adult lawyers in my family and my school, thought it was a good idea. And so it was just like, maybe I'll do that when I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I think it was never a serious option. But, I was always interested in that side. And I always think if I didn't work in conservation, I would work in human rights and like for someone like the UN or for a charity or something. So I've always had an interest in that kind of side of things.
In that space, yeah.
Yeah. When I was 20 or 21, 20, I think, I was doing my field data collection for my undergraduate dissertation. So, for non-UK listeners, I don't know if it's different in different countries, but in your final year of university in the UK, you do a big project. We call it a dissertation. Some people, I think, call it a thesis. Like my master's program in South Africa called it a thesis.
Yep,
we call it a dissertation in the UK. I don't know why we like to be different, but I did that on.
Do you guys
black
use
rhinos,
pounds?
Actually. Yeah, we use pounds. Yeah.
Use pounds. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
just checking. But yeah, you did on the black rhino is what you were saying.
Yeah. And I did my own data collection for that. I was very fortunate to be able to do that. So I was in South Africa, a different place, but I was in South Africa. And I met this really cool woman and she was a scientist and she would have been in her 50s. So she was an established research scientist. And we were just chatting one day and I was like, oh, your career is so interesting. Like, tell me everything. And she was kind of like, if I could do it again, I would work in policy. And I was like, such a cool career. And she just said, I just think you can make more difference in policy. And then we talked about it and she explained it. And she basically said, because research takes time and a lot of like the peer review process is slow, but also a lot of times you need long-term studies. And so within the lifetime of a human being, you can do a lot of research and you can get long-term studies and you can find out information and stuff. but you don't necessarily see it translate within your lifetime. And she was like, whereas in policy, you as an individual can make so much difference because you can
actually
take that stuff.
Notable change. Right.
And it was really interesting to me. And there's merit to both. And that was her experience. Like, I thought about it more and looked into it, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I've always been like partially motivated by wanting to make a difference. And I thought, oh, maybe policy is a good place to go. And because I do have an interest in politics and like legislation and stuff, I was like, maybe that would make sense for me. But I've always just really enjoyed research. So I'm like, I didn't want to go straight into doing a kind of internship in that and going into that immediately after uni. I was like, no, I do want to do research because I just love it. And then maybe later in life, transition into policy. And when I was doing my master's, I think that cemented it more. And then again, when I was in the Maldives and particularly seeing the bleaching, I was like, we need action.
Need something to change.
Now. Yeah. And that experience of, we had the knowledge, we had the research, we had the climate scientists telling us what's going to happen. What we didn't have was the actions then to prevent it from happening. And I was like, that's what we need.
Yeah, to back it up. Yeah. Okay, so those combined, all that combined is now then allowed you to have a clearer idea of what you want to do. And so now you're in the early 20s. You've been pretty well working in this one direction, which is awesome. That's really, really cool to be able to have an idea. You said before that it's that some of those fortunate people that know from the very start what they want to do in their lives. But it sounds like you're pretty well on that trail, and you've got a pretty good idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a loose plan, and it does change. But yeah, I have the broad ideas of I want to do research, I want to do a PhD, and then I want to do research for a while more, and then go into policy in maybe like 10, 15 years. It's a pretty loose plan. But yes, I was always jealous growing up, like at school. It was always the people who knew they wanted to be a doctor. It was just them, really. It was just the people who wanted to be a doctor. And I was always so jealous of them because they were like, I want to be a doctor and I'm going to go do medicine. And then they would go and do medicine and then they would be a doctor. And I was like, how do you know? I was so jealous of them. I was like, how do you know at this young age?
How do you even figure that out? It is, well, some people, I guess, just do know. I'm not one of those people, but I hear that they're great people as well. But it's fantastic that you've got an idea of where you're going, and that you're also helping out other people along the way. And so you've got a lot of questions that you received. I want to go into the game as we kind of land this bird a little bit. I would like to go into the overrated, underrated. Looking forward to seeing what you have to say about that. But first, what is the biggest question that you receive, or most often asked question that you receive through your social media about how people can work as a wildlife biologist or a wildlife conservationist? And what do you say to it?
The biggest question is probably...
Maybe common's a better word.
Most common question is about finding their first job normally. I get a lot of questions that are specific. So they'll be like, I've got this degree or I've done this, like, what do I do now? And I find those questions very difficult to answer. So I'm trying with my content because I can't advise you. I need a lot of information. I'm not like a career counselor that has access to your records and your grades and your country of residence and stuff like that, like all of these factors that play a big role. So, but what I'm trying to do with my content is give people the tools and knowledge to apply to make those decisions themselves. So a lot of the common questions are around where to find jobs, where to find internships, where to find paid positions, what to look for when scouting out a company, and then for the younger people, what to study at university. That I get, that's a very, very common question. And I get that because it is the hardest part of your career, is the first bit. It's definitely the hardest part.
Yeah, taking that first step, right.
Yeah, so I'm trying to share resources on where people can find internships and jobs, trying to share resources on what to look for in finding ethical organizations, and what courses I would advise if you want to do different things. I don't advise on specific universities because I can only really confidently talk about the 2 that I went to and the 2 specific courses that I did. Like where I went for undergrad, for my course, 10 out of 10, absolutely loved it, had a great time, would recommend it. For any other course, no idea. Absolutely no idea. It's a great city. I can say it's a great city to be a student. But any other course, don't know. For Cape Town, amazing city, amazing university. I'm a huge fan. And my specific course, unreal. But very specific, very niche. And it's hard and it's tailored to a certain type of learner. And I think, so I'm also even reluctant to fully advise it because I think it's quite niche. But it's a very broad topic, but the way the course is run is very different to anything I've ever seen. So again, I never ever advise on specific universities or even specific organizations unless I know them. But I do advise on what to look for, so like how to make those decisions, basically. But yeah, I think the most common thing is definitely about finding paid jobs in your early career, which is hard. It's very hard. And I feel their pain, and we all went through it. And as I said, I did a bunch of unpaid random stuff during the pandemic to just feel something and like have some sort of connection to COVID.
Something,
in our silly lockdowns and doing our like silly little like mental health exercises and just trying to cope. And so I definitely understand the frustration on the finding paid opportunities. So I think that's probably the most common. And I just hope that. But I love it when, so I have a broadcast channel on my Instagram, which is, if you've never used a broadcast channel before, it's basically like a big group chat on your Instagram, but only the creator or the admins can message. So I'm the only admin in mine, and so only I can message. So that's why I think they call it a broadcast. Like I'm like broadcasting stuff, but it goes to people's inbox instead of like a post. And mine is called Working with Wildlife. So apologies if I've completely plagiarized you.
When did you set it up? When was this? This is suspicious. Okay, now I'll back it.
I can edit the wording if I need to. But I send like job adverts on there that I see, particularly for early career stuff on Instagram. And
that's awesome.
I love it when I get messages from people who've got those jobs. Like I've had a bunch of people who applied for them having seen it and then got them. So
hey, that's awesome.
That's another thing I do. But it's mostly resources on like how to do these things yourself, because I would love to be able to just give one-on-one advice to everyone, but I don't think I'm qualified to, and I don't want to be. I could do it, and I could charge for it, and I could probably make loads of money, but I just feel like it would be a bit of a scam because unless I research every single university that you're looking at or every single job opportunity in loads of detail, I just think it would be unethical to. And I think people should be wary of people that offer you tailored advice who've never met you or don't know anything about your background.
Yeah, I guess it's also like with the content you create and what you represent, your brand, who you are and who you present yourself to be, obviously is a very trusting person. So people obviously trust you due to who you present yourself to be in your brand. So that's awesome as well. It's to have people that trust you is a good thing, and maybe not always an easy thing to do. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I would think I'm also on the not easy side. I think it'd be awesome to jump into the overrated underrated game if you're ready for that. So it's again, I'm going to give you a statement or a question, and all you need to do is respond overrated or underrated. If you can't choose, I'll give you a cheat code. You can say rated, or you can also break it down a little bit or I might ask you a question on it if I think it might be interesting to dive a little deeper on. Ready?
Yeah, I'm excited.
I knew you were. Awesome. Okay. Overrated, underrated. Overrated, underrated. The effectiveness of plastic straw bans for ocean conservation. Start off with the technical one.
I think maybe
overrated.
Slightly.
Okay.
I just think, well, they are great, and I advocate for plastic straw bans. I think they are important, but they've definitely become like the poster child for plastic pollution and then I think it means that we don't try in other areas where we need to try more.
Okay.
Like we think that's
so
enough.
It's a bit of a publicity stunt, do you think?
Yeah, kind of. I just think people are like, oh, well, we don't use plastic straws now, so we don't need to worry. And it's like,
so we're good.
Like, like we're using it as a scapegoat to then not cut our plastic in other places. So that's why I think it's slightly overrated, plastic straws specifically. But I do think it's a good measure, and we should not use plastic straws.
Interesting. Yeah, it's good. Set number 2, overrated, underrated sea turtle hatchling release programs.
Overrated, I think. It depends, because some of them are, I think, ethically done, and where that people are keeping their distance, and I think it's a cool observation, and I know people who've done it and they feel very inspired by it. And as I said, giving people access to nature, I think, is important. So I don't think we should get rid of them, but I do think a lot of them are not ethically run, so people need to make sure they're supporting ethical programs.
What defines ethically run?
So I don't like it, like, if it's the hatchlings, no one should be touching them. Like, you should not be picking them up. People need to maintain a certain distance back. People should not be in the water. They should be on the beach, but like at the back of the beach. Because, listen, the reason a lot of these things happen is because
I'm listening.
A lot of the hatchlings don't make it because it's a massive predation event. And I understand that the reason people then try to support the hatchlings is because sea turtle numbers are in decline. So I think that's good. I think we should be trying to promote more hatchlings making it to adulthood so that we have more sea turtles. However, if you are not allowing that predation to happen, you are massively interfering with the ecosystem. Those predators need food as well. And it's, some of them, things like seagulls, okay, yeah, they are not an endangered species. You don't necessarily need to worry about them.
We're not running out of seagulls anytime soon.
But like, when people are in the water because they want to get a picture of a cute baby turtle, like, you're probably scaring off the predators, like the big fish or the sharks that would have been there. So you're interfering with that. And then the same on the beach, like, you're stopping that predation. And some of that predation is important. It's a fact of life. And so I think we need to minimize disturbance whilst trying to promote like more turtles making it. And I think sometimes, when you see people like holding them, what are you doing? That's a wild animal, put it down. So I don't think, like, if you're not a professional, what are you doing? So yeah, I think, but sometimes they can be ethically run, and then I think it's a really cool way for people to have exposure to an endangered animal, which I think is always important. So overrated, but there is a place for the right versions of it.
Okay, interesting. Oh, number 3, imposter syndrome. Overrated, underrated, imposter syndrome in the conservation field.
Overrated. We like common, but we it's sad, and like, I have definitely had a lot of imposter syndrome, and I'm getting better as I get older at not having it as much. But I think you're not an imposter. You are here, like, if you are somewhere, there will be a reason, a myriad of reasons that got you there. And the one thing that really helped me is to kind of take myself out of it. Like, I got a lot of imposter syndrome when I was doing my master's because, as I said, it was quite a competitive course to get into, and I just the whole time was like, how have I scammed my way in here? And then I kind of took a step back and I was like, that is so arrogant of me to think that I scammed these people to let me in, that I would get anything past these leading academics. Like, some of the people I was being taught by were global experts in their field, and particularly continental experts, like within the continent of Africa, like some of the top scientists. And I was like, as if I, 22-year-old me, could convince them that, like, could get anything past them. So I was like, the audacity of me to even think that. And I think that mindset actually really helped me. That I was like, well, someone thinks I should be here. I maybe don't, but someone else does. So who am I to say that they're wrong? And that's something that's helped me. It might not necessarily help everyone, but I think cool. We should talk about imposter syndrome. So in that sense, it's underrated. We should talk about it more, because I think it's something that it's a very, very common thing. And I think there's solidarity in that, but it is overrated, and we should all, and it's very common, particularly in women, particularly in young women. And we have a right to be here. We should be here. And if you are there, you've done something right. So believe in yourself.
Awesome.
That's my inspiration.
Number 4. Yes, finishing up the episode strong with strength. Number 4, the commercial fishing bans. Overrated or underrated?
Underrated, I think. But I think these decisions on fishing bans should be made with the fishing industry. They should not be imposed upon the fishing industry. We need collaboration of what makes sense for them. I like the idea of no-take areas because there are studies that show that this actually improves fish stocks. If you have certain areas where the fish, there's no fishing, they will breed well, populations will expand, and this will spill out into the take zones. So long-term, it can be beneficial for fishing as well. I don't personally eat fish.
Yeah, makes sense.
But I'm not opposed to people eating fish, particularly the millions of people worldwide who are dependent on fish for their primary source of protein, their primary source of food, their
source
income.
Of income as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. They absolutely eat fish, eat seafood. But we want it to be sustainably done for prosperity for them as well, so that this is something that doesn't become like that they don't lose access to. So I think no. What was the phrasing you used?
Commercial fishing bans. Yeah.
So I think areas of fishing ban are good, but I definitely don't think they should be imposed upon the industry. I think we need to collaborate with the fishing industry, and then also, but I think commercial fishing, I guess, is different to subsistence fishing. So we need to make sure that anything related to commercial fishing is also helping people who fish for subsistence.
Okay, yeah. So you don't have a hard, no, we don't have a hard line, but that's a good thing. It's I would think because then you're thinking not just on one thing, because by saying no to another, you're impacting a lot of other dominoes. So it's fair. It's fair assessment.
Yeah. I'm not an expert for sure.
No, but you've your experience, and that's what you think. So I love it. The final one, fifth and final, overrated or underrated, bagpipes.
Oh, underrated.
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 You're a bagpipe player?
There was someone playing bagpipes in the street the other day, and it really improved my mood. There was like a busker playing bagpipes on the road. And I don't live in Scotland, and I'm not a player, but it was cool. I was like, power to this man. Like I really liked it. Underrated. I think I haven't spent much time in Scotland, but it's a beautiful country. Every time I have been there, incredible, amazing wildlife. And I would love to go and see like a proper Highland bagpipe performance. That would be sick. Underrated. They deserve no hate.
Bagpipes deserve no hate. The final words from Kate Sheridan. Where can people find you, Kate? What platforms are you on?
I am on Instagram and TikTok and Threads, I guess, through Instagram. And my handle is the same on both. It is conservation_Kate. Awesome.
Brilliant. Well, I'll add those in the description, like I said. Well, thank you for everything that you've given to us. Thank you for your insights on all these different aspects of wildlife biology, how people can work with wildlife, and also a bit of your personal story. This has been a real pleasure to speak with you. So thank you for everything that you've had to say.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching or listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to find more information on today's guest or more information on the podcast, you can find those details in the description below. Otherwise, I hope and look forward to seeing you in the next one.